Okay, so you know that feeling, right? You got a holiday coming up, maybe a few days off work, and yeah, there's that initial bit of excitement, but then almost immediately, there's this little voice thinking about the crowds, just the sheer number of people all trying to be in the same place at the same time. Did that sound familiar?
Oh, definitely. That mix of looking forward to it, but also maybe a bit of dread about, well, how packed everything's going to be. It really reminds me of this term that was floating around a while back, the Chinese-style holiday.
Exactly, I remember that. Back around 2012, this phrase, Chinese-style holiday, kind of emerged. And it captured this feeling that public holidays were just so compressed.
Right. Everyone off at the exact same time.
Yeah, leading to these huge, almost overwhelming spikes in travel. You don't hear the exact term quite so much these days, maybe, but the actual phenomenon, the crowds, that hasn't gone anywhere.
We're going to look at this whole thing specifically through the lens of what used to be called the China-style holiday, and some really interesting changes happening now in China's approach to holidays.
Exactly. You know, why there was limited holiday time and the kind of intense travel pressure that builds up.
Right.
And we'll also be digging into something often overlooked, paid leave, super important. And of course, the big news, the extended public holidays that are coming in 2025.
Okay.
So our mission really is to get under the skin of the holiday experience in China, understand the issues, and figure out what these changes might actually mean for people, for the economy.
Okay, so this term, China-style holiday. I know you said it's not used as much now, but the idea behind it, it still kind of rings true, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
That feeling of having like these short bursts of public holidays and then bam, everyone travels at once. Massive concentrated travel.
Yeah, that's the core of it. Pretty common for people to get frustrated, blame the tourist spots, blame businesses.
Sure.
Saying, oh, they plan badly or they're just hiking prices because they can. Price gouging.
That feels like a natural reaction though, right? You
Yeah.
see these packed places, the costs shoot up and you just think, hang on, this isn't right.
It does. Of people traveling during these short breaks just completely swamps the system.
Yeah.
They use the example of high-speed trains. Even running double the services, they're still packed, solid, just full.
Wow. So the scale is just immense.
It's fascinating, the scale of the challenge here. It's not as simple as just adding a few more buses or hotel rooms for those peak weeks.
Yeah, you can't build infrastructure for just 3 weeks a year, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The spike in demand is so huge, it might just not make economic sense to build that kind of capacity that sits empty most of the time. Businesses raising prices then.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's partly their way of making up for the quieter times, the off-season.
While some might spin these crowded scenes as, look, a booming domestic market, it might actually be a sign of something less healthy.
Yeah.
A bad experience for tourist destinations getting totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, and maybe businesses just thinking short-term, focused only on those peak profits because resources are stretched so thin.
Okay, so if we're trying to get to the root cause, maybe the number of fixed public holidays isn't even the main problem.
Exactly. They point the finger much more towards the implementation of paid leave. Something that, in many places is just standard. China actually put rules in place for this way back 2008.
That's right, 2008. Regulations that legally established paid leave as a right for employees.
Okay.
The basic amount is 5 days a year. Then it goes up a bit depending on how long you've worked there.
How much does it go up?
It's 10 days after being there 10 years and then 15 days after 20 years.
Right.
Now, if you think about a whole working career, let's say 40 years or so, theoretically, someone might rack up around 420 days of paid leave total. Okay, 420 days sounds like a lot when you put it like that, but...
Over a typical career, it averages out to only about 11 days per year.
11 days.
Well, it's way less than in many other countries, often less than half.
That really puts it in perspective. That's a potential pressure point right there.
It really is. And a huge factor here is that enforcing these paid leave rules, it's often much weaker than how strictly public holidays are followed.
Why is that?
Well, there are a few connected reasons. Low minimum wages being an issue.
Okay. How does that connect?
Well, it can create this situation where people feel they have to work overtime just to make what they feel is a decent, livable wage.
Ah, right. So taking paid leave actually feels like losing essential income.
Precisely. Taking that time off, even though it's paid at your base rate, might mean missing out on crucial overtime pay you rely on.
And it's not just the money, is it? The article mentioned attitudes, too.
Apparently, in many private companies, Bosses might see employees asking for paid leave as, well, maybe not fully committed.
Yeah.
Or like they're trying to get away with something.
A sort of presenteeism culture. Need to be seen at your desk.
Exactly. And the source says this isn't just in private firms. Even in state-owned companies, government departments, there can be pressure, sometimes subtle, sometimes not, against taking your leave.
Like it shows a lack of dedication or something.
Yeah. Some groups do tend to get and use their paid leave more easily.
Like who?
People working for international companies, for instance. Some of the better, maybe more modern private companies, higher level folks in government or public service, and teachers, of course, with their structured breaks.
Okay, so circling back to that China-style holiday problem, is that the real key to fixing it, to getting more staggered travel and better holidays? It's about making paid leave actually happen. Properly implemented, maybe even expanded.
Yes. Just adding a couple more public holidays on its own won't solve that core issue of everyone traveling at once because they have no other choice.
Right.
For paid leave to really work, it needs to be linked with raising minimum wages.
To give people more breathing room.
Exactly. Give employees more power, more agency. Break that cycle where people feel forced into tons of overtime just to make ends meet, which makes taking any leave, paid or not, feel risky financially.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. How do China's public holidays actually compare globally? Our sources had some interesting comparisons.
They did. Apparently, some Asian countries actually have the most public holidays, places like Myanmar, Iran, Sri Lanka, often tied to deep cultural religious traditions.
Okay, and where does mainland China fit in?
With its current 11 public holidays, it ranks somewhere around 80th globally, according to our source.
80th. So not the lowest, but definitely not near the top either.
No. And it's interesting to compare that with, say, Hong Kong,
Yeah.
right next door. But they have significantly more, 17 public holidays.
17. Wow. What are the extra ones?
Yeah, the source lists things like Good Friday, Buddha's birthday, the Chungyang Festival, Christmas Day, holidays that aren't public holidays on the mainland.
Right. It really shows how history and culture shape these things.
And another interesting point the sources brought up is how countries handle holidays that land on a weekend.
Oh, yeah.
In some places, like the Czech Republic apparently, if a holiday falls on Saturday or Sunday, well, tough luck, you just lose it. No extra day off.
Ouch. Whereas other places, like the UK or the US.
Right, they often have systems to shift it, usually move it to the Monday, sometimes the Friday before, so people still get that day off.
Ensures the break happens. And just to be clear, paid leave is totally separate from these public holidays.
Exactly. Paid leave is what your employer gives you on top of public holidays, and you still get paid your salary. Public holidays are nationally mandated days off.
Got it. Okay, so with that context, let's get to the good news.
The State Council's decision. Starting in 2025, 2 more public holidays are being added. It's a pretty big deal.
Definitely sounds like it. So what are the main changes? Our source broke it down.
Yeah, 3 key things. First, Spring Festival Chinese New Year gets an extra day. It's now an 8-day holiday.
8 days. Nice.
And this finally gets rid of that weird situation where people often had to work on New Year's Eve itself.
That always seems strange. Okay, what's the second change?
Second, Labor Day, May 1st. That also gets an extra day, making it a 5-day holiday break.
5 days for May Day. That's significant too.
It is. And it should mean much less need for those really disruptive makeup work days, working a weekend before or after just to get that 5-day break. Yeah.
People really dislike those. Okay, and the third thing.
The third thing is a new rule, basically saying you can't have more than 6 consecutive work days.
Oh.
So any makeup work, any compensatory days needed around holidays will be capped at just 1 extra day max. No more working 7, 8, 9 days straight.
That sounds like a huge relief for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Those long stretches were brutal.
Definitely. Now, our source laid out 4 main reasons why these changes are happening, which is pretty insightful.
Okay, let's hear them.
Firstly, it connects back to Bertrand Russell, the philosopher.
Yeah.
Back in 1932, he wrote this essay, In Praise of Idleness. He argued that as societies get more industrialized, more productive, giving people more leisure time is actually crucial for well-being, for personal development.
Wow, 1932. That's a long time ago. It shows this isn't a new idea.
Not at all. Secondly, the source mentions Hu Ping's work. He was apparently key in initially proposing the 2-day weekend in China. His research, like 40 years ago, basically said, early economic growth might rely on just working more hours, but as economies develop, the focus should shift. The technology, better management, efficiency, not just more time on the clock.
So moving from quantity of work to quality and efficiency makes sense for economic development.
Precisely. Third reason,
Yeah.
it's about the economy now. Consumer spending has been a bit sluggish.
Right.
And part of the thinking is, well, people need time off to actually spend money, especially on things like travel and tourism. So more holidays could help boost consumption.
Okay, a direct economic stimulus angle.
Seems so. And the fourth reason really hits home, I think. The source acknowledges just how unhappy people were with the old holiday system.
Yeah, the makeup days especially.
Exactly. The burdensome compensatory work. So it looks like the government listened to that widespread public dissatisfaction and responded, which shows, a certain responsiveness.
It does. And the choice of which holidays to extend, May Day and Spring Festival, that seems strategic too, right?
Very much so. These are already massive travel times.
Yeah.
Especially for migrant workers heading home.
Right.
So adding that extra day to May Day, making it a 5-day trip possible with only one makeup day, that could really help spread things out.
You mean take some pressure off the other huge travel peaks like National Day and Spring Festival itself?
Exactly. Help Insan diversify, spread out those enormous surges. The source even mentioned the crazy congestion in Guangdong during National Day. Anything to ease that has got to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And the extra day for Spring Festival?
That seems aimed more at just reducing the exhaustion, maybe.
Makes sense.
7 days sounds okay.
Yeah.
But when you factor in the travel, often long distances, plus intense family visits, it can be draining. That extra day might just give people a bit more breathing room to actually rest and enjoy it.
Okay, so overall, these changes sound like they're being framed as a real positive step. Moving China maybe a bit closer to other developed countries in terms of leisure time?
That seems to be the message. Russia having about 118 total rest days a year, Sweden around 126, France maybe closer to 150.
Wow, 150 in France.
Yeah. So even with these 2 extra days, bringing China's total public holidays plus weekends to maybe around 109, there's still room to grow.
Right. It's a step, but maybe not the final destination.
Exactly. The source suggests future steps could include, maybe more public holidays down the line, definitely expanding paid leave entitlements, and really making sure that standard 2-day weekend is properly enforced everywhere.
Okay. Now, there was one other potential reason, maybe a bit more speculative.
They speculated that maybe some external dynamics, referencing a period of global uncertainty, might be pushing a greater focus inward towards boosting domestic consumption.
Okay. And the link to holidays?
The idea being, if you want people to spend more domestically, they need 2 things. Enough income, obviously, but also enough leisure time to actually go out and spend it. So holiday policy shifts could be part of that larger strategy.
An interesting angle from that source, connecting domestic policy to wider trends, highlights how complex these decisions can be.
Definitely multifaceted.
All right, let's try and wrap this up. We've really dug into this China-style holiday idea, the history, the intense travel pressure from limited, concentrated time off.
Yeah, and we looked hard at paid leave, how crucial it is, but how the reality of actually taking it has been a major hurdle.
We compared China's public holiday setup globally, saw where it sits, and then spent a good chunk on these new 2025 changes, the extra days for Spring Festival and May Day, the cap on consecutive workdays.
And the various reasons behind them, from historical ideas about leisure to modern economic needs, and importantly, responding to what people wanted.
So for you listening, the takeaway seems to be potentially good news on the horizon, right? These changes could mean more chances to travel, maybe with a bit less of that overwhelming crush we talked about at the start.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a step towards improving that work-life balance, giving people more genuine leisure time.
What other tweaks or bigger changes to holiday policies do you think could really move the needle on people's well-being and that tricky balance between work and leisure in China?
It's a great question to ponder.
So, while giving everyone more paid time off sounds like a good idea for the long run, to ease the crazy rush when everyone's off at the same time, the truth is, China still has to deal with these huge, sudden waves of tourists during those big holidays. Until those changes actually happen and make a difference, they've got to use some quick and often pretty big ways to handle the crowds right now. That kind of leads us to wonder, how exactly does China manage when these massive floods of people show up? And how do they keep things from getting totally out of control?
Well, it paints a picture of just this massive surge in visitors.
Yeah.
And maybe even more interestingly, the quite remarkable ways the city, managed it all.
That's right. And the numbers themselves are pretty astounding to start with.
Right.
Shanghai welcomed a total of 16.5 million tourists over that holiday period.
16.5 million. Wow.
Yeah, and to really get a sense of the scale, that averages out to about 3.3 million people every day.
Every day.
Their usual daily average is just over a million. So, I mean, we're talking about a tripling, basically, of the normal volume.
Triple. Okay, so with that many extra people milling around, where were they all heading?
Well, it seems the historical areas were a big draw, particularly the French concession,
Ah, right.
with its really charming streets like Wukang Road and Weihai Middle Road as well.
Yeah, lovely spots.
And while we don't have like precise official counts for those specific areas, they consistently ranked really high in travel guides
Okay.
and got, glowing reviews from visitors. So there's clearly this strong appeal.
That sort of European style, right? In the middle of everything else.
Exactly. That aesthetic, that different pace, maybe it's a real contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't just the sort of established favorites pulling in the crowds, was it?
No. Apparently the Wukang building, that really distinctive structure,
Oh, I know the one.
that became a real must-see for both domestic and international tourists.
Huh. What drove that, do you think?
It seems like social media buzz. Reports said crowds were building up there as early as 9 in the morning.
9 a.m.
Suggests a real eagerness, to get that photo before it got too packed.
Right. Captures that trend perfectly.
It does. And it wasn't just about wandering historical streets or getting photos either.
No.
Even places like the Shanghai Zoo saw a big jump, exceeding 11,000 visitors.
11,000 at the zoo. Okay, that definitely gives you a sense of the strain on these popular spots.
It really does. And I mean, when you have those kinds of numbers packed into one place, well, managing the flow and keeping everyone safe becomes absolutely critical.
Yeah, you'd think so.
And our sources indicate the Shanghai police were very much aware of this. They implemented something called a 1.1 plan approach.
1.1 plan. What does that actually mean, do you think?
Well, it likely means a tailored strategy for each specific high traffic spot.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Considering its unique layout, potential bottlenecks, things like that. Focus monitoring, robust security, keeping traffic moving, all that jazz.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I thought. For a specific hotspot like that Wukong building, the local police station actually installed retractable bollards on the sidewalks. The idea was to kind of find a balance, right, between keeping pedestrians safe but still letting people get those photos they wanted.
Huh. That's actually quite clever. A very practical, on-the-ground solution.
Right. How do you reckon they controlled them remotely?
That's a good question. Probably some system based on crowd density, maybe controlled nearby or, remotely. It shows a really flexible approach, doesn't it?
It really does. And they even took steps with the street photographers, the ones working around these popular areas.
Oh, what about them?
Authorities actually met with over 30 of them beforehand.
Wow.
Yeah, to discuss, operating legally and ethically, trying to head off problems like photographers fighting over the best spots or having disputes with customers.
That's quite proactive. It's almost like managing a whole little microeconomy that pops up around these tourist spots.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Tourism creates opportunities, sure, but it needs careful management of, everyone involved. Addressing those potential friction points proactively, that shows a really thorough approach.
They reported the historical peak crowd density there reached over 5,000 people.
5,000 in that 6-way intersection area.
Yeah. And get this. If the crowd density hits 70% of capacity, they have an emergency evacuation plan ready to go.
Okay, that really underscores the level of preparedness, doesn't it? Having those thresholds, absolutely critical with those kinds of numbers. Predefined triggers, clear protocols. It means they can act fast if things get potentially dangerous. It's all about anticipating the risk.
Right, anticipating and planning. Okay, let's shift focus slightly. It's still on managing crowds, but maybe a different technique.
Okay.
Let's talk about the human wall on Nanjing Road.
Yes, the human wall. Quite famous now.
It is, isn't it? This is something they use during peak holidays. Our main source focused on May Day, but another one really digs into this during National Day. But the technique, the people involved,
Yeah.
It's basically the same idea for any big surge.
And the visual is just really striking. These armed police officers forming what they call a zipper-style human wall.
Zipper style.
Yeah, at key intersections along the Nanjing Road pedestrian street. So when the light turns red for pedestrians, the officers basically form this moving barrier, opening and closing like a zipper, in sync with the traffic lights. To separate people from any vehicles, they even call it an olive green scenery line.
That paints a picture, doesn't it? An olive green scenery line.
It really does. And we get a bit of a personal perspective, too, through Ma Xiao. He's a captain, been on Nanjing Road for 13 years.
13 years, wow.
Yeah. And he talks about how their deployment really ramps up during these peak holidays, National Day, May Day, New Year's, and at the really busy intersections like Nanjing East Road and Henan Middle Road. He can take over 50 officers just for that one crossing.
50 officers just for one intersection.
Sure.
That's a huge commitment of manpower.
It certainly is. Really shows the sheer effort involved, you know? It's not just standing there, it's coordinated movement, constant vigilance.
And training too, right? It's not just random.
Oh, absolutely. Specific training and formations, they call it, emphasizing that synchronized movement.
Okay.
Plus, using polite language, being ready for emergencies. It highlights a real level of professionalism.
Yeah, definitely not just a physical barrier. They're trained responders.
Exactly. And the description of the crowds, like a flood when the light turns green, and the image of the officers just standing firm in formation, it brings that scene to life. And their shifts are incredibly long. Noon until, like, past midnight, often.
That's grueling work. Physically and mentally, I imagine.
Undoubtedly. And it's not just crowd control either. What's really notable is the range of other things they do.
Like what?
Well, helping find lost kids, reuniting them with families.
Oh, okay.
Tracking down contacts for people who've lost wallets or phones. Assisting elderly people who might be struggling in the crowds.
Right. So a much broader role than just traffic management.
Definitely. First responders, a source of help. All rolled into one.
And the area itself, Nanjing Road, that's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It has. It used to be a two-way street back in 2010.
Right.
Now it's pedestrian only, which is great for shoppers and tourists, obviously, but it massively increases the sheer number of people.
Especially at peak times.
Exactly. They estimate it can reach like 70 to 80% of its capacity.
So that pedestrianization, while positive in many ways, directly leads to needing these kinds of innovative crowd management strategies.
Precisely. It's a trend in many cities prioritizing pedestrians. But this example shows you really need effective ways to handle the crowds that result. Safety, positive experience. It's all linked.
Which brings us back to that zipper wall. That started in 2014, apparently.
Yeah. Before that, the approach was more basic, just, stopping people at red lights.
Okay.
But they learned from experience, saw it wasn't ideal, and developed this more dynamic system. Opening, closing, synchronized. It's clearly much more efficient and safer, too.
That really shows that kind of adaptive problem solving, doesn't it? Learning and refining.
Absolutely. Recognizing limits, innovating. That's key in these dynamic urban places. The zipper wall is a real testament to that.
It's also incredibly dedicated work from the officers involved. They often miss holidays with their own families.
Yeah, that's a tough part.
There's a detail about parents sometimes visiting Shanghai during these times and only being able to see their kid on duty from like across the street, not wanting to interrupt.
Wow. That's poignant. That personal sacrifice, it often goes unseen, doesn't it?
It does. But it's crucial for making these operations work. Family support must be vital.
For sure. And it seems their efforts are noticed and appreciated. That viral video of the human wall
Oh, yeah.
got tons of positive comments online.
Okay, so people recognize the effort and the spectacle, maybe.
I think so. It's effective control, but it also provides this visible sense of security and order that people clearly respond well to.
And we also hear from some other officers, right? Gives a bit more perspective.
Yeah, Lin Ning, an instructor, he emphasizes how the crowds just keep getting bigger each year.
Really? Bigger than previous years.
Apparently so. And their focus remains firmly on safety and order. He mentions the personal sacrifices, but says it feels worthwhile when they see, orderly, happy crowds.
That makes sense. A sense of purpose in the job.
Exactly. That responsibility, that pride in keeping things running smoothly.
And there was another story, but more personal.
Oh, yeah. Hao Weiji, a squad leader.
Yeah.
He shared this really sweet little moment. His girlfriend surprised him while he was on duty, and his superior actually let him step aside for just a brief moment to see her.
Oh, that's lovely. A little human touch amidst all the chaos.
Right. It just reminds you, behind the uniforms, they're just people with lives and relationships.
Totally. And finally, there was Li Liu, a soldier involved in the wall. He talked about the long hours, just how often they have to do that open and close movement.
Must be exhausting.
Yeah. And the rigorous training. Perfecting even simple movements. Something like refining simple movements to the extreme is the key to mastery.
Mastering the fundamentals.
Exactly. And he mentioned the pride they feel when people applaud or photographers take their picture. That public acknowledgement matters.
You bet it does. Validation for all that hard work and dedication.
So, all right, let's try and wrap this up to bring this to a close. Shanghai saw this absolutely enormous surge in tourism over May Day.
Massive.
And this huge influx put, well, significant pressure on popular spots all over the city.
Right.
Which meant they needed really comprehensive and sometimes pretty innovative crowd management strategies.
Like the human wall.
Exactly. The human wall on Nanjing Road really stands out, doesn't it? As this visually striking and apparently very effective example of dedicating resources to public safety when facing just extraordinary numbers.
Yeah, precisely. What we've seen here is this really fascinating mix, you know? The enduring appeal of tradition, those historical districts are still huge draws, alongside these really modern, sophisticated crowd control techniques. It's a unique snapshot, really, of how a major global city handles the pressures and the opportunities of large-scale urban tourism.
It really makes you think, though, doesn't it, about that balance? How do cities everywhere strike that balance between, the economic benefits of tourism, which are very real, and the absolute need to keep everyone safe and well, both the visitors and the people who actually live there?
It's a constant challenge.
Yeah.
What other innovative solutions might we see pop up as urban tourism just keeps growing and changing? It's definitely something to keep an eye on.